Hi, this is the voice, Michael Chavello. You're listening to the Premium Oddscast, hosted by leading MMA odds maker Nick Kalikas, fight scientist and author of Fightnomics, Reed Kuhn, and MMA journalist Brian Hemminger. The absolute best UFC betting info, picks, statistics, and analysis from the most respected authority in mixed martial arts betting, MMAoddsbreaker.com.
Welcome to the Premium Oddscast, presented by 5 Dimes. I'm Brian Hemminger, joined today by leading mixed martial arts line setter Nick Kalikas to break down this Saturday's UFC 175 event, which takes place in Las Vegas, Nevada. If you're unfamiliar with our format, myself and Nick will be breaking down the fight card from top to bottom, providing extensive analysis and a pick for each fight after doing our film study for the event. Then, fight scientist Reed Kuhn will step in and offer his expansive numerical insight on all bouts with sufficient data. Today, Reed will be able to contribute on 5 total bouts. Now, also pay attention because our picks are subject to change following the weigh-in, so we will have an MMA Oddsbreaker staff pick article out with our official picks following weigh-ins. Now, briefly looking back at the last pair of events, our premium package bets for UFC Fight Night 43 and 44 went 2 and 3 to lose 1.1 units overall. We won our plays on Jared Rosholt and on Jake Matthews, but unfortunately we lost our underdog bets on Mike Rhodes and James Muntasri, as well as a very controversial decision on Antonio Braga Neto. We also had a free bet which won 2 units with Ray Borg and the over in the Ricardo Lamas-Hakran Diaz fight. Now back to the present, UFC 175 features an 11-fight card in total and will be aired on pay-per-view as well as Fox Sports 1 for the majority of the preliminary card this Saturday night. Let's dive right in. Now kicking off the Fight Pass prelims, we have a middleweight contest featuring King Kevin Casey, who is 5 and 3 overall, taking on Bubba Bush, who is 8 and 2 overall. Now Nick, where'd you open this fight and how's the public shifted things so far?
Bush opens minus 140, the comeback on Casey even money, and right now at the time of the recording, it is Bush getting the support because he's up to minus 180, the comeback on Casey plus 140. So open it with a slight lean towards Bush, and I'm not really that surprised that everybody's coming in that way. Kevin Casey doesn't get much respect from the betting public, from the MMA fans in general, and I do understand that. I mean, he's the type of guy that's very talented on the ground, a powerful guy. He's got good grappling abilities for sure. His stand-up's a little bit suspect, and his cardio has been kryptonite for him throughout his career. So I think a lot of people just don't have that much confidence in Casey. But that being said, man, you got to look at the improvement in his overall game. I mean, since the Ultimate Fighter, he's went on a 3-fight win streak since the Ultimate Fighter 17 lost to the Salmon, I should say. And those 3 fights were pretty impressive. I mean, his cardio looked better against Casey Ryan. That did go to decision, a clear decision that he did win. Against Mendez and Sanchez, he actually got an early stoppage in those fights because he's working on his ground and pound skills, and that has become a little bit more devastating. He's getting more knockout power. He's generating more power and using it more effectively, I should say. And he's putting in the work, definitely. And you could see that it's escalating his game, and you're finally seeing the Kevin Casey that should be there. I mean, with a more well-rounded skill set and a more effective, more dangerous type of fighter. I know I'm kind of pumping Casey up, and he's not that good yet, but this is a pretty close and competitive fight, I think, with Bush. That's why I'm saying all this. But Bush does have some advantages in this fight as well. I think, again, I pointed out one right away. He should have the slight cardio edge, even though Casey's cardio has improved. Bush, I think, has a little bit of a cardio edge over him on the feet. I expect Bush to be the more fluent striker. He's a little bit quicker. He's got some power in his own right as well. And I think he could just be more effective overall. He's got a solid wrestling game. Bush does. He gets the takedowns. He has good submission game to go along with it. So he's a pretty well-rounded fighter. So this is going to be an exciting fight. I think back and forth it'll go. And both of you guys, as far as defense goes, they're both a little bit flawed. Casey's chin's a little suspect. Bush has showed somewhat of a suspect chin overall. But I think it's a lot more solid than Casey is at this point. I mean, Bush is a little bit younger as well. So I think he's the more dependable, more solid fighter at this point. I'm going to slightly lean towards Bush to win the fight because I think he can do more damage on the feet. I think if he does get top position, he's going to have better ground and pound and be capable of hitting that little bit more of a suspect chin on Casey, and getting the win that way. So I'm expecting a competitive fight, probably. I don't know if it's going to hit the scorecards or not. I mean, I expect in my head to be so competitive that it might, but at the same time, both of them, again, are so defensively flawed that I could see it ending inside as well. But either way, I'm going to slightly lean towards Bush, but man, have some respect out there for Casey because the guy's definitely improving.
I'm going to go on the other side a little bit. I actually think that Kevin Casey has improved enough that he actually could win this fight. Now, Bubba Bush is, no slouch whatsoever. The guy has a very solid ground game. He's got excellent offensive wrestling and a really rock solid submission and ground and pound attack. The thing is, I think Kevin Casey is just a little bit more experienced, and he's looked so good since getting his UFC walking papers that first time. One thing that really stands out for me has been the last couple wins where he's really stepped it up and not just won, but won convincingly. So he's proven that he can win a decision in his first fight outside the UFC, and then he's going out and just taking out the garbage. I mean, it's been incredible. Now, Bubba Bush has actually looked excellent as well, and both these guys were champions. Kevin Casey was the champion at RFA. Bubba Bush was the champion at Legacy, so it's another Legacy versus RFA type of battle. And honestly, both these guys both absolutely deserve to be in the UFC. Doesn't matter if this is a short notice type of fight. Now, I think that Kevin Casey has actually made enough improvements that he's probably going to be a little bit better on the feet. Bubba Bush is just not very good there. He doesn't throw very good combinations. His striking defense isn't so great. He's a guy that absolutely needs this fight to go to the canvas. Now, Casey, his biggest strength is on the ground as well, but I think that he's a little bit more well-rounded than Bush. So if the fight does stay standing, I think Casey will actually get the better end of it. And on the ground, I think Bush is a little bit better of a wrestler. So if it does go to the canvas, I can see Bush getting on top position. And I think probably the biggest advantage that Bush has might be heart. When Kevin Casey gets in trouble, he definitely wilts. There's something that clicks there for him where things just, he's a bit of a front runner. If things aren't going good for him, he has a little bit of trouble coming back in fights. So that is an issue that he needs to deal with. Now, that being said, I think that Casey probably can keep this standing and outpoint Bush. And on the ground, I think Casey is good enough that Bush won't be able to implement all the offensive tactics that he normally likes to do. So I'm slightly leaning Kevin Casey, but not confidently whatsoever. So my pick is Kevin Casey. Now moving on and sticking in with the middleweight division, we have Luke Zachrich, who is 13-3 overall, taking on Guilherme Vasconcelos, who is 3-1. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Vasconcelos opens minus 170. The comeback on Zachrich plus 130. A little bit of line movement back and forth early on, but it has settled back at minus 170 right now over 5 dimes. Starting off in this fight, I'm expecting a pretty competitive fight because neither one of these guys is really an extremely talented fighter. Vasconcelos is a little bit more raw still. He's developing his overall game. He's a little bit younger, and I think there's more room for improvement. Where Zachrich has been a veteran of the scene for a long time. He's a pretty solid fighter. I mean, he's actually decent in all areas. I mean, his stand-up's okay. He does push forward and is aggressive with it. He's got underrated wrestling a little bit. He's got a good grappling game. So Zachrich is pretty solid. I mean, he's a true MMA fighter. But unfortunately for him, he's one of those cases where he's just not very dominant in any one particular area. So I think he's just okay, but nothing great coming out of him. So I do think that he's going to be a tough challenge for Vasconcelos because Vasconcelos is not that dominant in any area in his own right. But again, he's a little bit more raw. He's developing his overall skill set. I think on the feet, he's going to be a little bit more effective. He throws a little bit harder, and I think he's getting a little bit more confidence. I mean, if you look back before the Ultimate Fighter, I should mention that Vasconcelos is actually a tough Brazil 3 vet. He lost to Abreu on the show in the opening round there. So that's not even a bad loss considering how far Abreu made it and what type of fighter he is. But Vasconcelos, again, is one of these guys that just keeps on improving his skill set. And if you look back before the Ultimate Fighter, he's not very impressive on footage. But then you see his fight against Abreu, and you gotta kind of give him a little bit of respect because he's definitely improved his overall skill set. He's getting a little bit better. Again, with a little bit more time, more experience, you could see the improvement in his game. So I am leaning slightly more towards Vasconcelos in this spot because I do think his aggression on the feet, he's got a little bit more power. He's getting, again, a little bit more confidence with it. He is a very talented BJJ black belt, and he does look for takedowns. And once he gets you on the ground, he looks to take your back, and is pretty aggressive as well. So I think he's just a little bit better than Zachrich right now, almost in all areas. Zachrich does have that experience, that pure experience edge over him. And he's, so he might have a little bit of a more, I guess, mental edge over Vasconcelos. But overall, I think it's really Vas's fight to win or lose. I think he, again, is just a little bit better overall. I think he's going to be able to push the pace enough, possibly even stop Zachrich. If he does rock him on the feet, he could maybe take his back and submit him there. But even if it doesn't end, the fight hits the scorecards, I think it's going to be Vasconcelos, the one getting the nod, because he's going to be a little bit more effective in all areas, on the feet, on the ground. As far as cardio goes, actually, I should mention this as well, because I'm expecting Vas to be one of those fighters that fades and as the fight goes on, and maybe Zachrich can step in there and, do some damage in round 2 and round 3, but that's not the case. I actually have been impressed overall with Vasconcelos' cardio. He could definitely go, I think, 3 strong rounds. Both these guys, don't get me wrong, will fade a little bit, but I think that even that cardio is not that much of an edge for him. So even if it hits the cards, I think he's got the edge everywhere in his fight slightly, so I got to go with Vas in this fight.
Yeah, the only advantage that Zachrich really has in this fight is experience, and he's got a slight size advantage. I think he's about 2 inches taller and just slightly more reach. But everything else, I think Vasconcelos is actually a little bit better. He's the younger fighter. He's 28. And I just think that in terms of overall mixed martial arts skills, Vasconcelos is actually a little bit better. He's a very talented Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist. He's actually pretty decent on the feet, although he's a little predictable, but he has pretty good combinations. His defense is all right. He has good instincts on the feet, and he's got decent counter-striking ability. And that's actually something that you're going to need, because as seen in Zachrich's last fight, I mean, he went balls to the wall, charging right at Chao Magalhães and walked right into a huge bomb. So that is something that actually could be to Vasconcelos' favor here. Now, on the ground, Zachrich is actually pretty talented there. He's got decent offensive wrestling. He's pretty solid in terms of top position. He's got pretty good submission abilities. But I think that Vasconcelos' guard and overall Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu should be able to neutralize that. Now, if Zachrich does have a skill advantage, it might be offensive wrestling. If Zachrich is able to take Vasconcelos down and keep him down, he could potentially win a decision, but I don't really see him being able to do that for 2 out of 3 rounds, not even 1 out of 3 rounds. I can definitely see Vasconcelos outworking Zachrich on the feet, and then just outmaneuvering him on the canvas. I just think he's going to be a bit of the younger, fresher, quicker fighter. Zachrich just isn't that much of an athlete. He has the technique, but he doesn't have that explosion, that power, that athleticism to go with it. So that's where, you can have all the technique in the world, and that's where it's going to counter it out, where you face a terrific athlete. And I think Vasconcelos actually has a pretty promising future, although I do think he's a little small for the middleweight division. He might need to drop down to welterweight eventually. But for his UFC debut against somebody in Zachrich that is a very beatable opponent, I think he should be in pretty good shape here. So my pick is Vasconcelos. Now for the first fight on the Fox Sports 1 prelims, we have a bantamweight contest featuring George Roop, who is 15-11-1, taking on Rob Font, who is 10-1. Now Nick, where did you open this fight, and how's the public shifted things so far?
I opened Roop minus 180 to come back on Font plus 140, and since that time, I mean, the action has come in on Roop a little bit more. He's minus 210. The comeback on Font now is plus 160. Man, this should be a really good fight. I mean, Roop, what can you say? I mean, at 135, even with him being so tall for the weight class, I mean, he's taken well to 135, no doubt about it. He's looked tremendous in almost every fight. And he is taking this fight on as a late replacement coming in here, for him, probably mentally thinking that, just to get another win here and keep his momentum going, because he's such a solid fighter overall. I mean, Roop on the feet, he can outpoint you. He can pick you apart a little bit. He even has some knockout power to go along with in his hands and feet. On the ground, of course, he's got underrated wrestling. He's capable of getting the fight to the floor. He's got an okay sub game, but he's more of a grinder there too as well. And his sub defense continues to improve as his progression in MMA continues to improve as well. But man, I'll tell you what, for those people that don't know about Font, Roop has his hands full with this kid. Again, he's going to have the youth advantage over Roop, but just a few years. So he's got that going for him as well. I know he's been training with a good camp in Jersey there for a while too as well. Font has, and he's on the local scene. He's actually been pretty impressive. I mean, the level of competition hasn't been the greatest, hasn't faced near the competition, of course, that Roop has faced, but Font has shown capabilities definitely, and I think he belongs in the UFC, and he's going to make some noise at 135, no doubt about it. A little bit of background on Font. He's a former CES featherweight champion. He's dropping to 135 for the first time, so we should mention that as well. He usually fights at 145. And Font's the type of guy that he's got decent wrestling. He's more known as a striker, but he's got decent wrestling for being a striker. He's got that killer instinct. He's got a lot of power on the feet. Again, he's primarily a striker, but he's got that well-rounded skill set to go along with it. He picks his spot very well on the feet. He's got very good accuracy, and he's got this kind of almost special knockout power. I mean, it seems like he's not even maybe throwing that hard, and then, his opponent gets put out cold. So he's got that kind of special KO power to go along with it. And at 135, I think he's going to have even more so, if the weight cut goes well. So we're going to have to kind of tune into the weigh-ins for sure on this one and see how well the weight cut has gone for Font here. But overall, I think it's going to be a really good fight because Font on the ground, I mean, I would give the slight edge to Roop, of course, because he's been there, done that before as far as, being mixed in with better fighters, and he's seen more dangerous fighters on the ground for sure, Roop has. But I think Font, his takedown defense has developed enough where he's probably going to be able to maintain most of the fight up on the feet. And if he does, even though Roop has that long reach advantage, Font has fought some tall fighters in the past as well. So I don't think he's going to be too much out of his realm on the feet. I think Font actually has the striking advantage. And if there's any kryptonite in Roop's game at all, it's definitely his chin. I mean, once the guy fights another opponent with devastating knockout power, more times than not, he gets clipped and gets put out. So even though Roop could be winning this fight at any moment, I think Font can land that knockout punch and end this fight quickly. So I'm actually going to go out on a limb here and pick Font. I think it's a good matchup for him. I mean, he's one of these guys that's flying under the radar, but after this fight, he won't be any longer. I think, again, he's got the kind of capabilities to keep this fight standing, and on the feet, I do think he's a more dangerous fighter. He's a better striker overall. He's got more power, and with the kind of knockout power that Font has, in combination, again, with Roop's chin, it's not a good combo for Roop. So I think that Font eventually puts Roop to sleep because he has that special knockout power. So I am going to lean with Font.
And I'm in agreement. I really think that Rob Font is a pretty special talent. I had him on my show on Sunday and asked him about facing a guy who's so big like George Roop, but he's actually fought multiple guys that are Roop's size because as he was the featherweight champion of CES, so he fought some guys that were significantly bigger than him. He was an undersized featherweight. He was always actually looking to fight at bantamweight, but that's just where the opportunity came to fight for the title at featherweight, so he just stuck around and kept defending the title in convincing fashion. Now, Font is actually a pretty well-rounded fighter. He started his career in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and then slowly progressed in adding more to his game, and now he's actually more dangerous with his hands than he is on the ground. But don't discount his ground fighting, too. He's got pretty solid wrestling and submission skills as well. He can absolutely pounce on you and sink something in if he rocks you on the feet. And that's what he's been doing lately. He actually has been hurting a lot of opponents on the feet. He's dangerous with knees, with short punches, with counter strikes, with combinations. He's a pretty solid technical striker, and I'm very excited to see what this guy brings to the UFC bantamweight division. I don't think it'll be much of a problem whatsoever for him dropping down to 135. He hasn't even really been having to cut that hard because he, again, was an undersized featherweight. Now, for Roop has used his size relatively well at times. He's so tall and so long, but one of the disadvantages of being so long and so tall is that can give you, make it easier for people to take you down just because your fulcrum is a little higher. And then another serious issue with being so tall is you look so sucked out. He might be the person that looks about the worst at weigh-ins of anybody on the UFC roster right now. He has to cut so much. I mean, you pack a 6'1" frame into 135 pounds, even if it's only for a couple hours. I mean, it looks terrible. And that does take a toll on you in terms of taking a punch. When Roop loses, he usually loses by knockout. We've seen it time and time again. Cub Swanson did it. Mark Hominick did it. Francisco Rivera did it. I mean, it happens. And I think that Rob Font probably has the finishing ability to do it. Now, Roop does have some experience. He's pretty solid on the ground. He's pretty good on the feet. You know, he has some power. He has some pretty good body shots too. If he can really crack Rob Font in the body, that might be able to turn the tide for him. But I just think that Rob Font is the younger, hungrier fighter right now. And this is a winnable fight for him. So my pick's going to be Rob Font as well. Now, continuing on and moving back up to the middleweight division once more, we have Chris Camozzi, who is 19-7 overall, taking on Bruno Santos, who is 13-1. Now, Nick, what's the MMA Oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Camozzi opens minus 260. The comeback on Santos plus 180. Line has stayed steady. It's still minus 260 over dime, so not much movement on this fight. Seems like it's a good spot for right now, but I'm sure we'll see some movement as we get closer to fight time with parlays and other things as well. But as far as matchups go, to be honest with you, it's kind of weird. It's almost too easy for Camozzi, I think. Not taking anything away from Santos. I mean, he's got a 13-1 record. For a reason, because he's pretty solid. I mean, he's one of these guys that is definitely a very solid grappler. He's a strong guy for the weight class. He looks to take the fight to the floor and uses grappling, uses control, ground and pound. And he's kind of more of a grinder. He doesn't have a lot of submissions to his arsenal. He hasn't used them, at least. He's got a better BJJ game than really everybody suspects, but at the same time, he just doesn't use it enough. So he's more of a grinder. He just wants to land that ground and pound, control you, and just grind out a 3-round decision. So that's what Camozzi has to be careful of, is Santos maybe slowing up the fight. He's going to look to pin him up against the cage, just slow the entire fight down to take the advantages Camozzi has away from him, which is on the feet. Camozzi has a significant reach advantage over in height and pure reach over Santos. Camozzi's definitely the better striker. He throws up his combinations well. He uses jab well. Just everything as far as the clinch game works. As far as the kicking game, everything on the feet is a big advantage for Camozzi. One thing that Camozzi does not do that well is actually wrestle too much. I mean, he's got decent defensive wrestling. He's got decent takedown defense overall, but he hasn't been put on his back in the past. So we got to watch out, and he's got to be a little bit careful for that. But I think overall, he should be able to maintain this fight upright. And if he could keep off the cage, I think that Camozzi, it's really his fight to win or lose. I think that Jotko fought a relatively competitive fight with Santos in their last fight, but Camozzi's a better version of Jotko, actually. So this is a harder fight for Santos. And, he lost that fight. I'm expecting him to lose this fight by a more clear result, actually. So Camozzi, I think it's his fight to win or lose. If he fights smart and utilizes his total skill set, which he has over Santos, he's the more complete fighter, he's going to win this fight. So that's why I think it's almost too much of an easy spot here. So it kind of scares me a little bit, but honestly, Camozzi's solid enough. I mean, he's hard to knock out. He can be submitted, but again, Santos doesn't have that nasty submission game that's too much of a problem. So really, it's Camozzi's fight to win or lose here.
And I'm in complete agreement. Bruno Santos is going to be at several distinct disadvantages here. The main one, of course, is size. Camozzi's actually going to be about 6 inches taller than him. He'll have a huge reach advantage, and Camozzi is going to be significantly better than Santos on the feet. Santos really offers absolutely nothing in terms of stand-up ability. The guy just is slow, he's plodding, he moves forward, and he's pretty relatively hittable. That's just a huge concern. The guy is almost 100% reliant on stalling out fights, getting takedowns, getting to the clinch, making fights ugly. I'm actually pretty surprised that the UFC gave the guy a shot. So, he's just not a very UFC, Dana White friendly type of fighter. Now, Camozzi, on the other hand, is very fight friendly. The guy pushes a pace, he throws a lot of strikes, he lands a lot of strikes, he eats strikes. He can usually keep the fight standing against most mid-level and lower fighters, and he's actually got some decent boxing ability. Now, against the elite-level guys, he usually does, end up on the losing end, but against somebody here like Santos, as long as he can just keep this fight standing and he can avoid getting stuck against the fence or stuck on his back, he's going to be in terrific shape. Camozzi is going to be significantly better in terms of output, in terms of strikes landed, in terms of movement, in terms of conditioning even probably, because I really can't see Santos being able to stand toe-to-toe with him for 3 straight rounds. And, that just takes a special level of conditioning, especially because Camozzi does train at high altitude. So, honestly, I just don't see a whole lot in Bruno Santos. The guy he bores people to tears, and this is probably the last time we're going to see him inside the octagon, because I'm picking Chris Camozzi, and I think he wins pretty convincingly. Now moving on in the welterweight division, we have a battle between Kenny Robertson, who is 13-3 overall, taking on Ildemar Alcantara, who is 20-6. Now Nick, where'd you open this fight, and how's the public shifted things so far?
Well, I opened Alcantara minus 125, the comeback on Robertson at minus 115. So basically pick 'em fight. I mean, this is going to be definitely a very competitive back and forth type of battle. Both of these guys have shown a lot of promise. I mean, Alcantara had kind of a rough go there for a little while, but in his last fight, you got to give him credit. The guy ended up showing a lot of heart. His cardio was definitely improved as well. So I could understand and see why a little bit more of the public action is coming in his way. Right now, the line over 5'9" is minus 160. Robertson is plus 120. that being said, the way they match up, it's going to be interesting. I mean, it's really, I think, going to come down to, can Robertson get the fight to the ground and implement his submission and wrestling type of game? Because, man, he's definitely dangerous on the ground. As seen, again, in his last performance, very impressive. Robertson, even on the feet, he's not bad. He's got that kind of wrestling base, but he throws some unorthodox, powerful techniques on the feet. And again, I just talked about his jiu-jitsu game. Once the fight gets to the floor, he's very dangerous. I mean, he goes for all sorts of different kinds of submissions. He's got good control, decent ground and pound as well. Scrambles pretty well. Overall, again, his ground is his best attribute, no doubt about it. Now, Alcantara, though, on the other hand, he's not that on the ground either. I mean, he's maintained top position. He was, his wrestling, I would say, is a little bit underrated, actually. He's been put on his back. His takedown defense overall is not bad, but, I mean, he has been put on his back before. He transitions out and gets back up to his feet relatively well. And more times than not, though, in the wrestling game or if grappling exchanges, the guy ends up on top. So I think he's got decent enough sub-defense to probably not get caught by Robertson. And if that's the case, I expect him to be a little bit more technical on the feet, and a little bit more, I think, savvy overall in the fight and probably control more of the fight here as well. So I'm going to actually lean with Alcantara. He is going to have a little bit of reach in this fight. He's, again, going to have the technical edge standing a little bit. And I think if he doesn't get caught in the sub, he's probably going to win the fight. So I think it'll hit the cards and, or he even gets possibly late stoppage in this fight, but slightly leaning that way. But at the current odds, honestly, I think it's a dog or pass situation. I'm picking up Terra, but as far as the bet goes, that's a little bit questionable there.
I'm going to go the other way on this one a little bit, although not super confidently. I mean, Alcantara, I do think he's overrated, but again, despite being overrated, he's been coming through quite a bit lately, especially that last fight, against Tumenov, where, he got trucked in the first round and then came back and won a decision, showed a lot of heart, showed improved conditioning. So some of his flaws that we really pointed out before, he's been working on them. They're a little bit better. Now, age is not really going to be much of a factor for either guy, with Robertson being 30 and Alcantara being 31. Neither guy's really much of a prospect. And the biggest problem for me is, Robertson's biggest strength is the ground. He's got solid wrestling and excellent submissions. I mean, that ridiculous submission he pulled off against Brock Jardine was just a thing of beauty. It was one of the submissions of the year of 2013. But, Alcantara, that's where he's really strong too. Alcantara can go on the feet a little bit. He's nothing special there, but on the ground, he's actually very slick. So it's not 100% certain that Robertson will be able to pull something off if he does get on top. Now, my biggest concern in this fight is conditioning. Is for both guys, but I think especially for Robertson, his 2 UFC wins were both slick submissions, but they were in the first round. Every fight that's gone outside the first round, he's had trouble. He lost a decision to Aaron Simpson. He lost a decision to Sean Pearson. He got knocked out in the second round by Mike Pierce. So if this fight goes past the first round, I think it's not very likely that Robertson will get that finish. And he's going to have to rely on his wrestling to win a decision, which isn't a certainty, but I do think that Robertson is slick enough on the canvas and has good enough wrestling to kind of take advantage of Alcantara's weaknesses in takedown defense, and I'm going to pick Kenny Robertson, but again, not confidently. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, it is kind of tricky, as you said. First of all, there is a reach differential by 4 inches favoring Alcantara. So that may lean things in his favor, even though Robertson traditionally has been the more accurate striker. They tend to match each other in pace in terms of cage control, yet Robertson has operated at a higher overall pace while on his feet. He also has the worst defense. So he's a little bit sloppier in terms of he's aggressive, he lands a lot of strikes, but Robertson also eats a lot of strikes. He has been knocked down once. So it's hit or miss here, back and forth. I don't see a clear trend leading me one way or the other. We talked about the ground game. Alcantara's takedown accuracy is quite good. He lands them. He also has very good takedown defense. So if Robertson's wrestling is supposed to be the path to victory here, he is dealing with a difficult challenge. Alcantara does have a black belt in BJJ, so he's going to be fighting off some of those submissions. He also has a knee bar victory in the UFC. It's unusual. We got 2 guys facing each other, each with knee bar victories. So it's kind of a wash for me. I think that the line here is appropriately set. I don't really have a good feel for either one of these guys to see past the line and say one guy has a very clear advantage. I do think that given Alcantara's defensive capabilities, this probably makes it out of the first round. So looking at the totals, this should hit the scorecards, and then it's a question of, is Robertson simply on top and working hard enough to win the rounds, or will the lack of his submission game being a factor, is he going to end up losing these rounds to also an experienced grappler? So this one's up in the air for me, but I would not be surprised if it goes either way. I think it's probably going to go to the cards.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Reed. Now, moving on and dropping down to the bantamweight division, we have the headlining bout of the Fox Sports 1 prelims. We have Uriah Faber, who is 30-7 overall, taking on Alex Bruce Leroy Caceres, who is 10-5 with 1 no contest. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Well, I opened Faber minus 750. The comeback at Caceres was plus 450. That wasn't the case as far as where the line is now. I mean, tons of action coming in, especially heavy parlay action coming in on Uriah Faber. He's now minus 1580. The comeback is plus 750. So almost a scalp on the board compared to the opening line there. But that being said, it's a tough fight. I mean, in a way, I understand what everybody sees. I mean, Faber outclasses Caceres everywhere in his fight. He is 35 years old, though, so Caceres only 26. Caceres has a little bit of a youth advantage. He has some momentum on his side as well. Caceres had a pretty impressive victory in his last fight over Pettis. Now, granted, I think if it hit the scorecards, if he didn't get that late rear naked choke there late in round 3 in that fight, he probably would have lost the decision to Pettis. But it was a competitive fight, definitely. You got to give him respect for that. But other than that, I mean, he's been on quite a streak, and you got to give him a lot of credit because you could see the improvement of Caceres' overall game. He's got solid striking. He uses his reach and length well in most cases. He also has a good jiu-jitsu game. His ground awareness is getting better, but he has been subbed. That's been one of his flaws, one of his kryptonites for sure, is a sufficient defense. But at times, I mean, he's looked pretty savvy on the ground. Even with somebody on his back, he manages to scramble out and get back to a better position. But man, I mean, he's facing Uriah Faber here, and Faber, there's not many better at getting a position and locking in that sub, and I mean, taking your back, any kind of submission. Faber's definitely game at. I mean, he's got sick guillotine chokes, he's got good wrestling, you should be able to put Caceres on the back, good scrambles. Of course, his fight IQ is tremendous. I mean, the guy only loses to the who's who, to the champion level fighters. We all know that too. So this should be a no-brainer. It should be Faber's fight to win or lose. And I think he probably ends up getting the submission win over Caceres here as well. So I'm going to go with him. But at the current price, minus 1,500, you never know. I mean, honestly, I'm expecting eventually Faber to look human and show maybe a sign of age a little bit. I mean, the guy's been through wars. He's still in great shape. He still has it. I'm not saying he's on a decline, but still potentially eventually I think it could happen here. So I would not lay the juice on Uriah Faber in this spot, but it's hard to bet Alex Caceres against Uriah Faber as well. I just hope it's a competitive fight and the fans get to see a back and forth battle, but I think Faber's probably going to end it pretty early by sub.
And I agree. I think this is just a little too much too soon for Alex Caceres. I mean, he just fought Sergio Pettis in his last fight, a guy that was, on the rise, a good prospect, but Pettis wasn't anywhere near the top 15 yet. And now all of a sudden he's fighting a guy that just fought for the title, a former champion in the featherweight division, one of the most popular fighters under 155 pounds, probably the most popular fighter under 155 pounds on the UFC roster. So I'm just really concerned here about Caceres. I mean, Caceres is solid. I mean, he's on the rise, but the jump in competition level is so drastic, it's scary. And I just don't see any way he's going to be able to win unless somehow he knocks Faber out. And I don't think that's likely. I mean, yeah, Hayden Barao knocked Faber out, but I just don't think Caceres has Barao's power. And man, Faber's so aggressive, and he's going to be so motivated to come in here, especially on this 4th of July card. This is a fight to get people excited about the pay-per-view, so he wants to put on a show. He wants to take care of business. He wants to bounce back. And I really see him being able to do it. Faber is probably going to be able to exploit Caceres' takedown defense. He's a really long, skinny guy, and he should be able to get taken down. And Faber, when he's on the canvas, is insanely good. He will really actively pursue guard passes. He will actively look for submissions. He's extremely opportunistic. And Caceres, while he is pretty crafty on the ground, his biggest threat is the triangle choke, and I don't see Faber getting choked out by a triangle in a million years. He's just so strong and so competent on the canvas. Basically, the only thing I can see happening here for Caceres is, catching Faber coming in with a stiff, straight right hand or something like he did with Pettis. He actually did drop Pettis in the last fight. But Yeah, I'm almost certain that Faber should be able to just overwhelm him here. I don't think the age will be too much of a problem because, Faber just last year, was able to beat Michael McDonald. So, he looked really good in that fight. So I'm really liking Uriah Faber here. Obviously the line's way ridiculous for a bet, but Faber should definitely win. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, you guys have hit a lot of the key points here, and I think they are dead on. Caceres, his only chance here is to catch Faber on the chin as he's coming in, and actually he does have the profile that would give him that ability. He's a southpaw, 4-inch reach advantage, and his power head striking accuracy is very, very good. It's 40%, and this is not a small sample size. He has well over 100 cage minutes in the UFC. 40% is really unusually high. It's the second highest on this card, and that's only because someone else has a smaller sample. So he does have that ability. What he doesn't have really is that one-punch power. He's not a very powerful guy. Faber is 35. He's no longer the California kid. But his defense is pretty tight. It's better than average. So there is that really small probability scenario that Caceres gets lucky and clips Faber on the way in. It's a very small probability, but that I think is the only way Caceres wins this fight. Other than that, Faber, yeah, he is very well rounded. He is good pretty much in every way. And when I look at those stats, I have to remember, even where they look roughly average or not exceptional, that's because he's been in the cage. Most of his minutes are coming against guys like Renan Barão, Dominic Cruz, Jose Aldo. He has been champion caliber for a very long time. 236 cage minutes we're looking at in terms of the sample here, which is the most of any fighter on the card, actually. So we have a pretty good feel for what he's good at. And he is good at wrestling, and he is good at finding people's backs, and he's good at taking in the choke. I think it's 4 out of 5 of Caceres' losses have come by way of submission. That's probably how this fight ends. It's Uriah Faber closing the distance and just bullying a weaker fighter, because Faber, I think, is just simply stronger. He's better conditioned. He's far more prepared to go at full speed for 3 rounds. I mean, this is an unusual situation for him. It's not a 5-round fight. So, long story short, this is probably Faber, a layup for him to close the distance and get a submission, but look for those props. If you can get a crazy knockout prop on Caceres at plus 2,000 based on the odds I'm seeing, why not take a flyer there? But this should be Uriah Faber just teasing the audience for the pay-per-view.
Now, kicking off the main card of UFC 175 is a bantamweight contest featuring Marcus Brimage, who is 6-2 overall, taking on Russell Doan, who is 13-3. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Brimage opens minus 140 to come back on Doan, even money. And the line's actually flipped over 5 dimes. Doan is now minus 140. Brimage is even money. So a little bit more support coming in on Doan at this time. And I can see it. Brimage was kind of small for 145. He's still going to be a little small for 135. But, that being said, I think a lot of people, with that blowout loss to the hands of McGregor, didn't sit right with, I think, a lot of people. But that being said, you got to give Brimage a lot of credit. The guy is definitely a very talented fighter. He's another one of these guys since his time on The Ultimate Fighter has really taken the sport serious, and he's improved above and beyond what he showed on the show. He's got a good camp surrounding him, American Top Team, so he's going to continue to improve his overall game, and he's a hard worker. So I think that Brimage is definitely going to continue to improve his overall game, but that can be said about Doan as well. Both these guys are relatively young, 28, 29 years old, so they have a lot of room for improvement, and I think we're going to continue to see both growth in both fighters. Doan, starting off with him a little bit more so, he's a very complete fighter. He continues to improve his stand-up game. He's got some devastating, again, knockout power in the feet. He's got the kind of capabilities to end the fight. Standing, his boxing's getting better. He throws in kicks well. He likes to push a pace forward. He's going to have some physical advantages as far as size goes over Brimage still. Even though Brimage is dropping to 135 for the first time, Doan's going to be about 3 inches taller. Although Brimage is going to have the pure reach advantage over him, which is interesting. But Doan still should be physically bigger. He's going to look, I think, to push the pace against Brimage. He's going to look to kind of bully him around and maybe possibly get the fight to the floor, because if any weakness in Brimage's game, it's definitely still the ground game. Brimage showed some decent submission defense in his fight against Hedges, and along the way he's continued to improve his takedown defense. So if Doan can't get the fight to the floor, I think we're going to see an interesting stand-up battle because I think Doan has more capabilities of finishing the fight on the feet, but Brimage has better pure boxing, and he's got some underrated power in his own right, and he's got the fight IQ too. That's one thing I got to mention with Brimage that I do respect a lot is he's a pretty smart fighter. I mean, he knows what to expect from fighters. He trains well, he prepares well for them, and he counters well as well. So I think on the feet, if it does stay up, if Brimage stuffs the takedowns and keeps it upright, I do give the slight edge to Brimage. I think he can land more effective punches, and he can outbox Doan a little bit, and maybe get the decision nod because I think that Brimage can probably, I think, look a little bit better throughout 3 rounds than Doan, especially again if he's able to stuff some of those takedowns. I think he can kind of push a higher pace back towards Doan. Even though Doan is aggressive and likes to push pace, I think as the fight goes into round 2 and round 3, if Brimage is still there and doesn't get submitted quickly or knocked out quickly, I think he's going to be able to push the pace back, and I think he's going to start taking control in this fight. So honestly, as far as a pick goes, back and forth, I've been going myself. I mean, it's hard because I can see Doan actually finishing this fight by submission or KO. I can see him maybe possibly even winning the decision, and I can see Brimage again kind of taking control of this fight as it goes and possibly grinding out a decision win. And maybe he's got more devastating knockout power at 135 than he did at 145, so maybe we can see a finish there as well. So this is a pick I could flip on, but right now I'm going to pick Brimage.
And I'm going to slightly disagree on this one. I think that Russell Doan is pretty solid. I think the biggest advantage he has against Brimage is that he's just more well-rounded. Now, Brimage is a pretty decent striker. He has a high pace. He can go the distance easily. He has excellent cardio, and he does move pretty well on the feet. The problem, of course, is on the feet, Brimage is pretty hittable. You know, he looked great in fights against lower-level guys like Stephen Bass and Jimmy Hedges, who is not a threat whatsoever on the feet. But, against a guy like Conor McGregor, who is an accomplished striker, he got lit up. So that is a concern. Now, I'm not saying that Russell Doan strikes like Conor McGregor. He doesn't. But I do think that Brimage, he does have some defensive flaws. And I don't think they're going to be corrected just because he's dropping down a weight class against faster guys. The only thing that's really going to help him here, dropping down, is he's not going to be completely outsized by monsters like McGregor. Now, for this fight, I think that Russell Doan, the problem with him is his last fight, we didn't learn a whole lot. He got taken down a few times by Leandro Issa. He got outworked in the first round, and then he took advantage of Issa gassing, was able to thwart some takedown attempts, got top position, landed some decent strikes, and then got a submission. Now, that's not going to happen this time around against Marcus Brimage. Brimage has significantly better cardio than Issa. Brimage should be in perfectly good shape. So Doan will not be able to take advantage of that situation. But Doan does have a better ground game overall than Brimage, although his wrestling is not his strong suit. So if Brimage does want to shoot in for a takedown, he might be able to get it, although I really don't see him doing that. Now, on the feet, I think that Brimage actually should be slightly better, especially because he does have the reach advantage here. But don't count out Doan, especially because I think that Brimage's chin is not that great. As we saw, McGregor was able to completely put him out. Now, I'm not saying that Doan is easily going to be able to knock him out too, but if he does connect with something solid, he has some good power, he could definitely pull that off. And I just think in the end of the day, the fact that Doan is the more well-rounded fighter, can win this fight in multiple areas, especially, in the clinch and on the ground, that I'm going to go with Doan, although it's not confident, because if it stays standing and Brimage is able to work his game plan like he did in his first 3 UFC fights, then Brimage could definitely pull this off. So I'm very tentatively picking Russell Doan. Now, moving back up to the middleweight division, we have Uriah Hall, who is 9-4 overall, taking on Thiago Santos, who is 9-2. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how's the public shifted things so far?
Hall opens minus 425, the comeback on Santos plus 305, and the line has stayed relatively steady here with Uriah Hall still actually at minus 425 in the same comeback on Santos. So, I think a lot of people are probably not anxious to bet this fight, and I don't blame them. I mean, Uriah Hall has all sorts of potential, all sorts of talent. I mean, overhyped on The Ultimate Fighter, of course, by Dana White, by Son, and by everybody. I mean, people were saying that this guy could be eventual title contender, and that's not the case here. I mean, again, physical attributes and ability, and has he shown signs of being a great fighter? Yes, but has he been consistent enough? No. I mean, he doesn't have that killer instinct, unfortunately. I mean, he did show it on top for a while there. It looked like he was going to knock everybody out, but then all of a sudden reality struck, and, Hall gets a little bit too inactive at times. He lets people control and push the pace, And that's not a good thing. Now, this fight with Santos, on the other hand, I mean, Santos is coming off that huge win, of course, recently, and that, I think, brought him, it saved his job, really, realistically, more than anything else, too. But Santos, he really shouldn't even be fighting at 185, so, but he did perform well, and he is definitely a solid striker on the feet. I mean, that's what he does best. He's a Muay Thai stylist. His ground game's decent, but he does tend to get put on his back a little bit, so his takedown defense is not up to par in most cases, and he's not one of these guys that's going to go crazy with submissions when he is put on his back. So I think Santos' best shot to win this fight is by keeping it upright and, again, utilizing some of those nasty kicks that he's got, throwing some good combinations and utilizing some of that length, although Uriah Hall is going to have a pure reach advantage of, I think, about 4 inches over Santos as well. So the way these guys match up, really, it's just such a hard fight for Santos because Hall should be a little bit better on the feet. Hall should be a little bit better on the ground. Hall should be able to dictate where this fight goes. So that's why you're seeing him coming as such a steep favorite. And I think that he should get the job done here. I'm actually expecting Hall to look for more takedowns in this fight and put Santos on his back, maybe end it there. Because I think that he's more than capable of doing that. So he's not going to probably want to stand and strike with the striker. Even though he should have success there as well. I think he's probably going to play it safer and maybe finish things on the ground this time. If not, he'll be able to grind out a decision. So it's hard to have faith and bet on a guy like Hall, especially at minus 400, but realistically, this is a fight he should win, so I'm going to pick Hall in this fight.
And I'm in complete agreement. I really don't see how Hall loses this unless he completely flakes out like he did in the John Howard fight and the Kelvin Gastelum fight. Now again, Howard and Gastelum ended up being, better fighters than we expected, but this time around, man, this is a match made in heaven for Uriah Hall. He definitely did have his disappointments for a little bit, but Thiago Santos, man, I cannot believe this is his third fight in the UFC and he still hasn't dropped a welterweight. Like, this guy just must not like cutting weight because he is going to be significantly smaller than Uriah Hall. Hall should be much more physical, so if this fight is attempted to go to the ground, Hall should have no problem fending him off just with pure strength. He doesn't even need a lot of technique here. And Santos, he likes to stand. I mean, he did finish that last fight. It was very surprising, huge underdog against Ronnie Marquez, and he pulled it off with a really nice body attack. That was different, though. Ronnie Marquez was a bit slower. Ronnie Marquez was not a very good striker, and a lot of people thought that Ronnie Marquez was just going to take that fight to the clinch and get it to the ground, and he wasn't able to do it. It was ended very quickly. This time around, Uriah Hall is a fantastic striker. He can do things in the cage that most middleweights just cannot do. He is a devastating striker with a lot of power, and I really think that if he comes in here motivated, Uriah Hall should have no problem putting away Thiago Santos, just like Cesar Ferreira was able to do in Santos' debut. So it's all a matter of where Uriah Hall's head is at, because clearly he is the better fighter than Thiago Santos, and this is definitely a match made for Uriah Hall to look really good on a pay-per-view that features a middleweight title fight. They want some middleweights to stand out from this card. That's why there's so many middleweight fights on the card. So I'm definitely picking Uriah Hall. Unless something fluky happens, I don't just see him winning. I see him winning in devastating fashion. Now, continuing on and moving up to the heavyweight division, we have a very interesting bout between the returning Stefan Skyscraper Struve, who's 29-6 overall, taking on Matt Mitrione, who is 7-3. Now, Nick, where'd you open this fight, and how's the public shifted things so far?
Well, I opened Struve minus 140 to come back on Mitrione, even money at plus 100. And right now, Struve is obviously minus 210, for those that have been keeping up with the line. A lot of movement coming in on Struve. A lot of people believe that, it's going to be kind of an easy win against Mitrione because just Struve should outclass, a fighter like Mitrione. Mitrione's pretty one-dimensional overall, and Struve's a very talented fighter, has a lot of skill all over the place. So I think that's why you're seeing Mitrione right now at plus 160. So I'm not sure what to really honestly say about this fight. I mean, Struve definitely has all the skill set. He's good on the feet. He's more technical than Mitrione on the feet. He's got that length and reach. Surprisingly, though, it's going to be, I think, only 1 inch of actual reach. I mean, he's got obviously the height advantage over Mitrione, but pure reach, I think he's only going to have 1 inch. So that is a little surprising. Usually Struve has more of an edge when it comes to pure reach over people. But the definite edge that Struve has in this fight is the ground game. I mean, I think he's going to probably end up at one point getting the fight to the floor. And once the fight hits the mat, he's going to have a significant advantage over Mitrione. Mitrione has improved his takedown defense. It's actually solid. It's getting better, all the time. And even his submission defense is improving as well. But I mean, he's outclassed severely by Struve on the ground. So I think Mitrione's best chance is to land that knockout punch. That's the kind of fighter he is. He's got devastating knockout power on the feet. Definitely you cannot sit there and just start trading and exchanging with Mitrione unless you're Roy Nelson, I guess. But that being said, it's really Struve's fight to win or lose. But the question marks and why I opened it a little bit lower, I mean, he's been out for so long. I mean, we all know about his heart condition. I heard everything's okay, and we should see a better version of Struve as well. A lot of people were banking on that. I just don't know, man. It's just a risky fight, I think, as far as the betting line goes, to lay that kind of juice over a guy that's been out for so long, had the questionable medical condition, and he's fighting against what seems to be his kryptonite, which is against a knockout puncher that is more than capable of finishing the fight by KO. So Struve overall, it's kind of weird because I don't want to say he's got a suspect chin. It might not be a little bit fair towards him because he's fought a lot of heavy hitters in the UFC, and he's taken some hard shots and withstood them as well. I mean, Hunt ended up finishing him very late in that fight, and he landed some shots, and Struve was okay with it too. So it's kind of hard to say that he does have a suspect chin, but at the same time, you got to look at it for what it's worth. And he has been knocked out that many times, and he's fighting a guy that can knock you out. So as far as a betting standpoint, it is a little bit dangerous to lay that kind of juice. So I think it's another situation where it's dog or pass. Mitrione, bank on him getting the KO here, or just pass and see how Struve does perform in this fight. But as far as a pick goes, as far as ability goes, you have to go with Stefan Struve here because I think he is the better overall fighter, and he should come back and get the W here.
And I'm in agreement on this one. Stefan Struve is just hands down the more well-rounded fighter. He's going to have a huge size and physical advantage, although Mitrione I think is a little bit better of an athlete. The problem with Struve obviously is his chin. Everyone knows that. In almost every single one of his losses, he's been knocked out. That's a huge, huge red flag. So if he gets clipped on the chin, he's going to go down. But what he has been improving on is he's getting a little bit better at using the size. He's still not good at it, but he's better, and he uses his ground game often, and he's got a very high level ground game. So if he can do that against Matt Mitrione, he should be fine. You know, Brendan Schaub was able to get Matt Mitrione down and then immediately submit him. I mean, it was quick. And if Brendan Schaub can do it, Stefan Struve can 100% do it. And that guy has significantly better Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu credentials than Brendan Schaub. So that's really what this fight's going to come down to. I think on the feet, Mitrione is probably going to have an advantage just because he can take it a little bit better. He's more powerful. He's more explosive, so he can get inside and crack Struve on the jaw if he needs to. And I just think what Struve needs to do is drag Mitrione to the ground and tap him out any way he feels comfortable. And another thing that you really gotta watch out for is, while people are really worried about the ring rust because Struve's been out so long with the heart condition, he was fighting with that heart condition for a while, and that was making him a little more tired. It was affecting his cardio. You know, we saw his hands just completely drop before he got knocked out against Mark Hunt. He could barely lift them. I think that'll actually help him. His cardio will be better, but he might be a little rusty and tentative at first. So they'll offset each other a little bit. So I really don't think it'll be that much of a problem, because the physical advantages of what he recovered from will be offset. So I'm going to pick Stefan Struve. I think at some point he does submit Matt Mitrione, but you got to watch out for that chin. So Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, I'm in agreement on the ways that this fight could end. Matt Mitrione does have knockout power. He has 7 knockdowns in his UFC career. And keep in mind, his UFC career is his entire professional MMA career. So 7 knockdowns, whereas how many takedown attempts does he have? 0. This guy has literally never attempted a takedown in his entire mixed martial arts career. That is remarkable. I'd really have to do some digging to figure out if anybody's been in MMA that long and has never attempted a takedown. So he wants this standing, and he's going to be looking to land the big shot. The problem is, he is going to be facing someone that is unusually as long as Mitrione is. These guys have about the same reach. Mitrione is used to being longer than his opponents, and he's going to have to worry about that takedown. So that could cause him to be a little bit more hesitant in his offense. And Struve is a precise striker. So both these guys actually hit pretty well. Struve is used to actually pushing the pace, mixing things up. He throws a lot of kicks. He's got the kickboxing background, whereas Mitrione is a little bit more one-dimensional. He's just, boxing. He's going after the head. But if Struve can close the distance and get that trip, I think he gets this on the mat and he gets a submission. He's got good sweeps. He finds ways to mount. He looks very, very comfortable rolling, and Mitrione is not the kind of guy that's going to be able to last like that. So, I'm definitely leaning Struve here. I do have some personal bias. I do know him and I've worked with him. So full disclosure on that. But I also think that, taking the under on this is probably a safe bet too, because Mitrione probably only wins this one way.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Reed. Now moving on to the co-main event of the evening, we have a women's bantamweight title fight between champion Rowdy Ronda Rousey, who is 9-0 overall, taking on the number 2 ranked Alexis Davis, who is 16-5. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Another bad line alert compared to my opener and where it's out there now. I mean, Ronda Rousey, I opened minus 735. The comeback on Davis was plus 445. And right now, looking over at 5 dimes, the line on Rousey is minus 1750. The comeback on Davis is plus 850. So a tremendous amount of support coming in on Ronda Rousey. Everybody on the planet seems to be putting her on parlays and thinking that this is a walk in the park. Hard to bet against a special talent like Rousey because, the girl, the crazy thing is she's still a little bit raw in developing her overall skill set. I mean, we all know how great she is with her judo background. She can get the fight to the floor and how devastating her arm bars are. I mean, she's so slick. I mean, her jiu-jitsu has looked superb, really, in the octagon, no doubt about it. I mean, it's just, once you get to the floor with her, it's only a matter of time, basically, in most cases. Before she does get that armbar. So I think that's what people are banking on here. But against Alexis Davis, I don't think it's going to be as easy as people think. I mean, Davis is a fairly well-rounded fighter in her own right. She's actually going to have the pure striking advantage over Rousey. I know Rousey looked a little bit better, and she keeps on improving her skill set on the feet, but you got to look at it like it is. And Davis definitely has more skill right now at this moment on the feet. She's more capable of landing better shots, more accurate punches, I think, on the feet as well, mixing things up well. But she has to worry about getting taken down. And I think that's going to be her game plan. She's going to look for that takedown, get Davis on their back and try to, grab that arm. If not, get positional control, maybe do some ground and pound and try to finish her off that way. But Davis is tough as nails, man. I mean, she's so hard to finish. She knows what to expect in Rousey as well. So I do think actually where the line is now, we're going to see it come back down, quite a bit. I think we see it come back down to reality a little bit more because Davis will get eventual support out there and respect because she's a very talented fighter. I know a lot of people are probably not too thrilled by the fact she squeaked by Jessica Ai. I mean, that was a very controversial decision. So she's in this title spot and really a lot of people believe she doesn't even deserve to be there. So with Rousey's incredible performance against McMahon, I mean, she just keeps on improving her overall game. Like I said, she keeps on getting better and she's so dominant. She's kind of reminds me of a GSP or Anderson Silva for her division. I mean, she's that kind of fighter, or Jose Aldo, we should say that. So she's that kind of special talent. They can just hold on to that title for a long time. I mean, it's hard to believe anybody beating Rousey right now. I'm going to be rooting for Davis, but my pick is officially going to be Rousey.
And I think that the problem here is, while Alexis Davis might be the most technical fighter that Ronda Rousey's faced, I mean, she is a spectacular grappler and she's pretty solid with her Muay Thai on the feet. The problem is Ronda Rousey is such a better athlete. I mean, it's no question. And Ronda Rousey was an Olympian. She's explosive. She's quick. She moves well. She hits with power, both with on the feet and with her knees, obviously from the last fight against McMahon. And then when she's on the ground, she is ferocious. So, as good as Alexis Davis is overall in terms of well-roundedness and technique, sometimes technique just cannot win the day because somebody is just so much faster and stronger and bigger and more powerful. And I think that's the problem here. Ronda Rousey is so good. And on top of all that athleticism that Rousey has, she has technique too. She's just as technical as Alexis Davis. She's just able to back it up with pure physical force. And I think that on the feet, Rousey should be able to outwork Davis. She's probably going to be able to outstrike her with punches. If she gets her in the fence, I think she's going to throw harder, more damaging knees and elbows. And then on the ground, Rousey's going to mix up some ground and pound and then really attack hard with some submissions. So I really don't see Rousey's conditioning being a problem either. So, this is just a one-sided fight for me. Alexis Davis is talented, and she's probably going to be able to fend off that armbar attack for quite a while. But Ronda has shown that she doesn't need to just attack with the armbar now. She can finish you in other ways. So I'm gonna pick Ronda Rousey, but it's tough. It's tough to pick anybody against Ronda Rousey. So my pick is definitely Ronda Rousey. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, it's hard to put numbers on Ronda Rousey. She is kind of an anomaly in a lot of ways, but some of the numbers do back up what we're saying about her. First of all, her ground control is pretty darn good. She has very high frequency takedowns while standing. She keeps the fights mostly on the ground. In fact, 69% of all of her fight time is spent on the mat, and she is in control for the most of that. So her takedown offense is good. She comes quickly with takedowns. She lands most of them, and she dominates people. So the talk about Alexis Davis as a viable contender is that she is a jiu-jitsu expert, and she is arguably the best grappler that Ronda has faced. But Ronda also pairs power with that technique. And a metric that tells me that she's the stronger of the fighters, traditionally, is that in the clinch, she's the one in control, and her clinch control metric is actually abnormally high. So when she's pushing people around, she's the one in control. So we've seen her throw a lot of sweeps. She uses her legs to flip people around, and in the blink of an eye, she has that arm and it's over. But we've also seen more recently now that she also throws inverted triangles, and she throws knees and elbows. So she continues to improve her game, evolve it. We haven't even probably seen the best of her yet, and yet the one that we're seeing right now with the current odds, if she hits at minus 1750 or anywhere near it, she will be the biggest favorite in UFC history. So this is arguably a record-breaking performance for the UFC and certainly for women's MMA. And it's hard to go against that. Depending on how crazy those lines get, that may open up some opportunities for some interesting props. Davis might put up more of a fight in the first round, for example. I think in the in the second fight against Tate, I was pretty sure that Tate was going to put up a fight in the first round and make it out of that first round, because that's how crazy Ronda Rousey's odds are, is that it opens up otherwise somewhat normal props and it actually puts value on them. So keep an eye out for some of those smaller opportunities, but as a straight up play, yeah, Rousey is a justifiable big favorite, but at these odds, it's hard to play any side.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Reed. Now let's move on to the main event. We have a middleweight title fight between champion Chris Weidman, who is 11-0 overall, taking on former light heavyweight champion Lyoto Machida, who is 21-4. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how's the public chipped at things so far?
I opened the line Weidman minus 150 to come back on Machida plus 110. This line skyrocketed all the way up to, this line has been out for a while, so I should say that. And it skyrocketed all the way up to like over 3-1 at one point, and now it's coming back down to reality a little bit. Weidman's about 2-1 at 5 times right now. Man, a lot of support on Weidman. I mean, I love the guy. Honestly, he's a very talented fighter. He made me a ton of money against Anderson Silva, so gotta respect him for that and his skill set overall. I think guy is another one of these guys that just keeps on improving. He's got a lot of power. He's got the wrestling to go along with it. On the feet, he's a force to be reckoned with because the guy just has devastating knockout power. I mean, with his elbows, with his hands. I mean, even obviously checking leg kicks. I mean, ask Anderson Silva about that too. So, I mean, it's just, the guy is one of these fighters that overall, there has been a buzz around for a long time with Weidman. A lot of people were expecting good things, and he lived up to it. So he's another one. We were just talking about special fighters and with Ronda Rousey. Weidman's another one of these guys that really could be a special fighter. Now, that being said, he's got a difficult task at hand against Machida. I mean, Machida's a very talented fighter in his own right, and I think he's going to have several advantages in this fight. I just spoke about Weidman's striking, how effective he can be on the feet. I mean, the guy's definitely very smart. He's got good accuracy. He's got good knockout power, but I think Machida has the edge on the feet as well. I think he uses angles better. His footwork's better. He's got the speed advantage over Weidman. I think his accuracy is pretty good in its own right as well. And I think a huge edge he's going to really have over Weidman, bigger than anything else, is probably the cardio and the stamina. I mean, Weidman has not been tested. He has not been to a grueling 5-round fight before. Machida's had a couple of them, so he's been there. He's been, I think, tested in that range pretty well, and he's passed with flying colors. I think as the fight progresses, and if Machida does not get finished early on, He's going to have several spots to maybe possibly finish the fight on his own, by KO, because I think Weidman, there's a possibility that he starts fading late in this fight. And if so, even though Weidman has a pretty solid chin, I think Machida could step it up a little bit and possibly finish Weidman by KO. Now, of course, the big edge Weidman's going to have as far as wrestling goes, I mean, most of us know that. It's hard to take Machida down, though. I mean, Machida's takedown defense overall is pretty solid. He has been put on his back before by wrestlers, but he manages to get up more times than not and back up to his feet. And then it becomes a striking matchup. So if this fight plays out for the most part on the feet, I think you have to give the edge to Machida. He is the better striker. Now, again, Weidman has that knockout power. You always have to be cautious and careful. And can he knock Machida out? Yes, there's no doubt about it. But can Machida also outstrike Weidman, outpoint him a little bit on the feet by using angles and getting in and out like he does and throwing precision punches? Yes, he can as well. So I think really that it's a bad matchup for Weidman, even though that I did favor him highly against Anderson Silva. I think Machida's a different type of fighter. I think Weidman is going to struggle taking this fight to the ground. And I think as the fight progresses again, his cardio is going to be an issue and Machida's going to start taking control. So for me personally, I know that I'm going to be probably one of the only people out there. I haven't heard too many people actually picking Machida, but I'm going to pick Machida to pull off the upset win here. I think he is the better fighter at this stage. What worries me though is he is 35, 36 years old. So he's getting, I mean, at that part of his career where I'm not sure how much he's going to have left, but there hasn't been much of a sign of decline with Machida either. So I think he's going to perform well in this fight. And again, if he doesn't get caught, I think he's going to probably win by finish himself or possibly a decision. So my pick is going to be Machida to become the new UFC middleweight champion.
All right. And I'm going to slightly disagree. I do think that Machida is a live dog, but, in a bout of 50% type of thing, I'm going to lean with Weidman here. The main reason is, he's just a younger, I think he's stronger physically, I think he's got a little bit more pure punching power, and he's the better wrestler. So, going into that, while Machida does have excellent takedown defense, I think Weidman should be strong enough, at least in the first couple rounds, to get him on his back. The thing that's scary, though, obviously, that Nick mentioned, is the conditioning. We have seen Weidman slow down in the past, and in most of his recent fights, he's actually got a really quick finish in the first 2 rounds. We haven't really seen him tested in a 5-round fight, and I think that could definitely play into this. But in terms of what Weidman's capable of, he's definitely improving on the feet. He's got some solid stand-up ability. He's got some good power with his punches. He uses pretty good head movement. He's not easy to hit. I mean, he won the first round against Anderson Silva in both fights. People keep forgetting that, how fluky they say that his finishes were in the second rounds. He won the first round both times. That's not something that a lot of people have done to Anderson. And he probably should be able to win the first round against Machida as well, just with a combination of aggression, wrestling, and then Machida being a little concerned about the takedown attempts. And the thing is, as this fight wears on, I think Machida should be able to pick up the pace a little bit. He'll be the fresher fighter. I think Machida's conditioning is rock solid, and Machida should be able to outpoint him. The problem is, I'm not sure that he'll be able to do enough to win a decision. Weidman could definitely win the first 3 rounds. Weidman could get a finish early. Weidman could use his wrestling late even. As long as he can get on top, he's strong enough and imposing enough to stay on top. So I'm going to pick Chris Weidman, but it's not confident because, again, Lyoto Machida is such a tricky fighter to prepare for. So Chris Weidman's my pick. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, they say what we have all said. Machida is arguably one of the best strikers in the UFC right now. And with the decline of Anderson Silva, or as soon as Anderson Silva steps aside, I would say Machida is the best striker in the UFC. His knockdown rate is absurd. He's, I think, 4th place all time for knockdowns scored. His head accuracy is very high. He has been doing it and for a very long time against very high level talent. Now, on the flip side, Chris Weidman comes in completely clean. When you're looking for knockouts, it has a lot to do with the offensive fighter, but it also has a lot to do with the defensive fighter. Chris Weidman has never been knocked down. He's never lost a fight, never been TKO'd, obviously. He's still younger. He's 6 years younger. He's going to be the much longer fighter. And he has very good head strike avoidance, 84%, almost as good as Machida. We talk about how elusive Machida is. Well, Weidman's stat is almost identical. So, for those reasons, Weidman should be able to stay out of trouble. But I do agree, if it stays standing, Machida is the technically more skilled guy. It's Weidman's durability, his strength, and his early aggressiveness and the threat of takedowns. That's going to be what gets him through those early rounds. Weidman is also dangerous on the ground. He's never been taken down. He's 100% takedown defense. So he has been pretty dominating using his wrestling, which makes him a pretty efficient fighter in terms of grinding out rounds. So my lean is Weidman here. It will be interesting to see where the lines land. I wouldn't, if they go too far in Weidman's direction, I would back off a play there. Because I do recognize how dangerous Machida is. Again, there's maybe some props here because both guys, as the fight wears on, are gonna have opportunities to hit the other one. And Machida, as dangerous as he is 36. He has been dropped a couple times. He can't, take punches forever. Strikers do age a little bit faster than wrestlers do, simply because of brain health. So, he is also susceptible just as he's capable of ending the fight. So there may be some props that it doesn't go the distance. The over-under, I think, is graciously set at 4.5 rounds. So I think it's easier to lean towards the under there. But we'll have to see where it all lands. But straight up, yes, Machida is making this a more interesting fight than I think some other opponents might have made it. But the lean is still towards Weidman. But certainly, I think this is the tightest, the most competitive fight of the main card, probably in terms of I'm going to be on the edge of my seat because anything could happen at any time.
So that'll do it for our full event breakdown for UFC 175. Part 2 of the Premium Oddscast featuring our premium bets will be out Friday night around 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So stay tuned for that if you're an MMAOddsbreaker.com premium member. If we have a free play to give out, make sure to follow @Premium Oddscast on Twitter because that's where we'll post them first. We can also notify you of our free bets via email if you prefer that method. Just send an email to picks@MMAOddsbreaker.com and we'll add you to our free bet mailing list. Also, feel free to like our Premium Oddscast Facebook page. We post articles, show announcements, and plenty of other information there so you can stay up to date on everything from us if you're interested. Special thanks to our sponsor, 5 Dimes. Good luck, everyone, and hopefully the betting gods are on your side this weekend.